Hello everybody. So today another MicroStrategy video. Didn't want to do this, but it keeps doing all-time high. So I keep making these videos to tell you my thoughts as I go. This stock has caught the attention of the entire market. You know, I was talking about it for a while. I've been talking about this stock for about 2 years now when it was trading at a much lower price. One of the recent videos I made was 5 months ago when it was at 100, for example. For now, the stock is now at $235. What am I doing? Am I selling? Absolutely not. Am I buying? Well, I don't get to ask myself that question because the position is too large in my portfolio. It's too full of a position. So this is not a question that I get to ask for myself, but I'm definitely not selling. My plan is to borrow against it someday. The performance has been outstanding. This is a stock that I remember buying in the 180s pre-split, prior to the 10-for-1 split. This has been an outstanding performer for me, for us, for many of us who have bought this stock. Buying MicroStrategy, by the way, why is it trading at a premium to Bitcoin? In my view, it's trading at a premium to Bitcoin because it A, actively shorts the USD, and then B, of course, it buys Bitcoin on your behalf. What is the playbook of the MicroStrategy right now? Not the future Bitcoin Bank playbook, but the playbook right now is you dilute the stock slower than you add Bitcoin to your pie. What is the playbook? They issue convertible debt that they borrow for free. The interest payments are really nominal. They don't make any sense, like 0.8%. You borrow for free for 5 years. Remember, corporate debt is interest only. When the maturity of that convertible debt comes, say in 2027 or in 2030, these debt presumably are going to convert because the buyer of these bonds are not dumb. They want to get to buy MicroStrategy in 2030 at $139 a share, for example. If it is trading at $1,000 a share, you assume that all of the debt will convert, which it would, unless the stock, of course, was trading at a lower price than these target price. You see the 204, the 232. The only reason why you wouldn't convert is if the stock then, right, in 2030, 31, 32, if it was trading at that point below 204, 232 or 204, that's the only point where you would not convert. So assuming, these people are rational, which they totally are, they will convert at these prices. So you've exchanged future dilution of 10% down the road for growing the pie of Bitcoin 29% today. And that's what MicroStrategy, that's what Michael Saylor calls the Bitcoin yield. So you had a 17% yield on that dilution, and I think it's a brilliant playbook. You short the US dollar and you buy the Bitcoin and you force the market into Bitcoin. Short-term catalysts, that's what I want to discuss in this video. So like I said, it seems to me, to the best of my research, looking at all of the rankings, I remember not too long ago when it was ranking at like 350 in all of the stocks in the US markets, it seems to me like we are past the threshold for Nasdaq inclusion. We are like close to the 70s, like the low 70s. So there should be Nasdaq inclusion if we hold that 235 price. If we go higher, I think that's in the books. But if we hold that price, I think it's looking pretty darn good for the Nasdaq inclusion, provided that that price, of course, holds in November, in the last trading day of November. If that happens, MicroStrategy would be added to the Nasdaq 100, the QQQ. What it means, for me, it's very clear. It means every month a perpetual bid from retirement accounts, retirement funds. A lot of funds own the Nasdaq in retirement. That's that buyer at any price. That means that MicroStrategy would have a lot of options for liquidity if you had that capital coming in on a monthly basis, on a weekly, bi-weekly basis from people's retirement and people's paycheck. This is why this is a powerful story in my view. They joined the QQQ. That's not the only catalyst. I have more catalysts. So another catalyst, of course, we've been waiting for that every quarter since this was allowed, but it's the fair value accounting change, which means that they will report major earnings. It's likely they'll do it in Q1 when they have to do it. They're waiting the last minute, it seems to me. When they do that, they will report major earnings because all of a sudden, Bitcoin can be marked up and reported as investment gains in the income statement, as opposed to simply being reported as a loss. That was indefinite intangible accounting. That's what it was. Now you can report gains and losses when there will be eventually losses if Bitcoin fluctuates and drops and keeps the volatility. That's going to be a major catalyst. I think when MicroStrategy reports this enormous gain, I can picture this making the news, around all of the main financial news outlets who do not dig deeper to understand what that gain is really just a paper gain. And it's really been there for us who analyze the stock not through the lens of current accounting standard, but through the lens of actual economics and actual common sense and, finance in a way. So that's one catalyst, the fair accounting standard. So again, QQQ is a catalyst coming up. One reason why I don't want to sell right now. Fair value accounting is coming up. Another reason why I don't want to sell right now. A third reason why I don't want to sell is it's looking pretty clear. And as I walk in my Texas neighborhood, as every 2 out of 3 political signs tells me from the homes in my neighborhood down here, it seems pretty clear that there is a presidential winner that is showing in the polls. And now Polymarket is saying 63% that the Republican candidate will win. Now, why do I bring this up in the context of MicroStrategy? Well, there's only one candidate that spoke at the Bitcoin conference and that expressed being pro-Bitcoin, and I think he has his own cryptos and stuff. I mean, I don't really do crypto. I mostly focus on Bitcoin. There's only one, and it seems like he's winning. And when I look at the state races, this is real clear politics. I guess I'm still using the old favor website for U.S. presidential election. It seems to me like it's looking very good in Arizona, very good in Georgia. And, when I go for all of the state race, it seems like they don't even include Florida as a swing state anymore. So it seems like Florida is already earmarked for Trump. So of course, it's all about the swing states in the U.S. presidential election. And so it's looking like the pro-Bitcoin candidate may win. And so if that happens, what does that mean for Bitcoin, for MicroStrategy? Probably really good if the pro-Bitcoin candidate wins. Remember, by the way, and it's a note here, MicroStrategy does not always trade in tandem with Bitcoin. Over the past few weeks, it has not been very much correlated with Bitcoin, a little bit to the upside, but not as much as you would assume. So this company is kind of taking off on its own and having its own strategy of the Bitcoin bank. I feel that narrative is really kicking in. Tax management. This is something that I see seldom discussed. It's not very much discussed, but to me, it's a catalyst. I view it as a catalyst. For example, I am up 8 times on my MicroStrategy position now. 8 times. Do you think I want to sell? Right? Do you think I'm ever selling? I don't want to incur the capital gains tax. Absolutely not. I'm not incurring that capital gains tax. And my plan, and this is a plan that a lot of people do, savvy investors, billionaires, you name it. That's how Musk bought Twitter. What's the plan is you borrow against the shares, right? That's how the fiat system works. That's my plan. Someday down the road, if I ever need to, but it's the plan. It's the plan, borrowing against the shares. And I think a lot of people are going to take that approach to capital management of just borrowing against your shares. And that's one form of capital gains tax management, and why a lot of people who own big tech, they've been owning big tech since the early day. Look at Bill Miller. Bill Miller's portfolio is 50% Amazon, 50% Bitcoin. You think he's ever selling Amazon? You think he's ever selling Bitcoin? No, he's not selling Amazon because he would have to pay that capital gains tax. So this is how you do it, right? Famously, in the early days of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he bought a $30 million house. He pledged a few of the Facebook shares, and then he bought his $30 million house with a few of the pledged shares of Facebook. This is how it works. No financial advice. Anyways, this is, and I don't own options on MicroStrategy, but I rarely do options. I do options a little bit here and there when I find a stock interesting. Options are part of my strategy. Tesla is the stock on which I have the most long-term call option, right? The so-called leaps. That's where I have the most. I don't have any options of MicroStrategy, but it occurred to me that a lot of people do have these options, and they have short-term options, right? So the risky kind of option where you can get a lot of exposure for not a lot of money. And my question is, are they going to call the shares? Of course, when we talk about options, most people say, oh, I'm just going to roll over the option, or I'm going to sell the call option. But when you do that, you incur a taxable event. One way to not incur a taxable event, which I think, if you're up 20x on a MicroStrategy option, you really want to be careful about that. I think a lot of people may end up calling the shares. And this is, by the way, the only way I approach options personally is calling the shares. So what I do when I buy my long-term call options is I'll buy a long-term call options, and I have the intent of buying the shares. And so what happens when you buy the shares is because you used the option the way they're supposed to work, you use the option to actually buy the shares at a lower price, you don't pay a tax on your gain because you haven't made the gain yet. You still own the shares, you haven't made the gain yet, you just bought more into the trade, you bought the shares. And so what happens is the cost of your option just gets subtracted from your new cost basis, the money that you put in to buy the 100 shares per option contract. Sure, you need some capital in order to exercise your options and buy your shares. But if you are in a situation where someone, say, has a lot of options, what you can do is you can just sell a few options, incur capital gains on these options, and then use these options to exercise the rest of your call options. And so I think a lot of people, the so-called, and they make the rounds on Twitter, right? The so-called MicroStrategy millionaire, of which there seems to be a lot of, based on my reading of Twitter and my reading of the media, they will think about, proper capital management, especially depending on your jurisdiction, depending on whether you have a state tax or not. This is part of proper planning. So my guess is that a lot of people are going to decide to exercise those call options. And what could that mean as a short-term catalyst for the stock price? It could mean something pretty crazy. Something a la GameStop is what it could mean. Because when I look at the options, and again, I'm very conservative in my investment. I like the common stock. I don't do options as much, but I like to think I have a basic understanding of options. The most active stock options are, get this, what is the fifth most active stock option? MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is more active than Amazon, more active than Palantir, more active than Alibaba, more active than American Airlines, than Microsoft, than Meta, right? Facebook, more active than Facebook. These are Intel. These are major companies. It's in the top 5. This is the most active option chains, one of the most active option chains. It has an option chain that is as active as the Amazons and the big tech of the world. And so I recommend, I don't recommend anything, but if you're interested in that, go on Google Finance. And this is my scroller on Google Finance for the expiry just a few months out. It's endless. There's so many options on MicroStrategy right now. So many people hold the options on this stock. And when I look at the open interest, right, how many shares could potentially change hands if people actually decide to exercise these options? Well, I get a few big dates. I get tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big date. I get November 15. November 15 is a big date. And then I get January 17. January 17 is the biggest date. 184,000 options times 100. To give you a hint, I tried to calculate if all of the shares change hands, what would that be? That'd be about 10% of the float. That could be about 10% of the float. What if more people exercise their options than usual? What if people decide not to get cash for their options, but decide to buy the options, to buy the shares? Where do you find the shares? How high do the shares get bid up? So the options kind of enhance this somewhat self-fulfilling prophecy and surprise that MicroStrategy has been. And we have big events coming, even after that in 2025. So we'll see if the bull run is still on, but there's a lot of stuff going on with the options. If you're an options expert, I recommend, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, but I think this is going to be a big deal. So I recommend you leave me a comment. That I can do. Leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Anyways, I'm fine with a roller coaster personally. I mean, come on, Tesla for the past 4 years, my first or second biggest position, end phase. Roller coasters don't bother me, and this is what happens when you've been investing, in my case, for well over 10 years, you get used to the roller coaster, and you don't care anymore, right? Amazon, how many 80% drawdowns has Amazon had? Right? You just don't care anymore. So me, I'm totally fine with a roller coaster. This stock could go up 30% or more, and I would not break a sweat. I know myself. But anyways, if selling is an option, I understand that some people are going to have a very different strategy. They're going to say, oh, I want to sell. And of course, if you're in a tax advantage account, yeah, it makes sense. You could sell in exchange for another stock, or just buy the TLT or whatever people are talking about on Twitter. So that could be fine. But me, I'm trying to optimize my taxes. And by that, I mean, I'm trying to not pay too much taxes. And so I'm trying to hold on to my assets for the long term. It's my style of investing. It's long term. And it's also, I think, my way to manage the tax. MicroStrategy, therefore, to me, it's a long-term hold, and it's a long-term hold beyond just the story of the options expiry in January 17 and over. To me, it's a long-term story because of these long-term options that this company will have. So first of all, right now, the strategy is you issue debt at 0.8%. You buy Bitcoin today. You dilute later on by turning that debt into straight equity at a later date, 5 years, 7 years later. I believe another strategy that we could implement if the price gets crazy, right? Remember Tesla issuing 5 billion shares in September of 2020. They issued $5 billion in shares when the stock hit an all-time high. Nvidia did the same thing when the stock started running. It's smart to issue equity at the market when your stock is going through a big spike, right? GameStop did that. GameStop is nowhere in line near bankruptcy because they were able to take advantage of a high short price and dilute at a very high price. I think if the price gets crazier, it would make sense for MicroStrategy to just do straight equity and just do a straight at the money offering, straight new equity ATM. Boom, you just sell new shares, you get the money, and you buy the Bitcoin. Very simple strategy. I believe they could do that. They could also do that if you have a perpetual bid coming from the QQQ. Imagine if you have a perpetual bid coming and you just issue new shares, you can have the ETFs just put money at the high. And so I think that's something that's up in the future. And then down the road, I have grown more and more used to the idea of MicroStrategy becoming a Bitcoin bank. I'm pro self-custody. I have self-custody. My real Bitcoin is owned as self-custody, but in a brokerage account, I think MicroStrategy as a Bitcoin bank, I'm sorry, I love that story. How could they make money, right? You lend your Bitcoin to traders, like people who want to short, and then you earn a yield. This is one of the ways that your brokers makes money on your stock. They lend your stock to people who want to short it, and they earn a yield. This is a way MicroStrategy could earn a yield on its Bitcoin. Then my favorite, I don't see a lot of people discussing that, but MicroStrategy could wrap the Bitcoin into a token on another blockchain or on the Lightning Network. But let's say they would wrap Bitcoin on a token in Solana, and then they just have a transaction fee on that app on Solana, and they earn the transaction fee on their wrapped Bitcoin trading on another blockchain, either the layer 2 of Bitcoin, which is a Lightning Network, or a whole bunch of other layer 1s like your Solanas, your Ethereum. I could entirely see that happen where you just wrap your own Bitcoin and make it available for people to trade, for people to spend, depending on the nation you're at. Then, very straightforward, right? You could borrow dollars against your Bitcoin to either buy more Bitcoin or pay off debt. We know that this is a strategy that MicroStrategy has done before. I think it was 100 million with Galaxy Holdings or something like that back in 2022. They've done that before. They could do it again. then you could do just a straight loan. You could lend money for venture capital purposes. You know, you could have in Bitcoin jurisdiction, like say the El Salvador. Who knows if any country in the Gulf, for example, starts adopting Bitcoin? You could just lend Bitcoin for venture capital purposes, and of course it's very risky. Of course you may lose the Bitcoin, but that money wouldn't be lent at the rates of today. It would be lent at exorbitant rates, what seems like exorbitant rates today, but it really would be lent at hard money standards. And the hard money standards, to me, it's what I describe at medieval times interest rates, right? The interest rates that used to be charged when you would lend money to somebody who would just go off on a horse, on a quest somewhere, and there was a lot of, crime, and you could never see the person again. So the interest rate was really, really high, right? Actually, it was probably closer to 50%, those interest rates. You can do those rates on a hard money standard if you get compensated for your loss. And lastly, is lending Bitcoin to too big to fail banks. And that you can accept a lower rate, because you know that if you lend Bitcoin to a too big to fail bank, if the bank is going to have a problem, the bank's going to have a bailout. And so your Bitcoin, you may not get it back, but you'll get the value of that Bitcoin, and you can write that in a contract, and then you can use the value to repay some of the convertible debt and not dilute, for example. That could be one of the many ways. So to me, this is a long-term story to me, And you also have the issue of what if one day, for example, they had so much Bitcoin that the stock MicroStrategy would be trading at lower than asset value, right? That's another strategy. You can buy back your shares, buy back your stock because you're trading below book value. There's so many things that they could do over the long run, which is why right now my main plan is to hold it for the long run. The only caveat is, where is this going to head us? Where is this going to lead us? Remember Volkswagen in 2008, most valuable company in the world. Remember GameStop, although GameStop was entirely different, right? I just want to point that out. Different story, but remember that. Like, who knows who this could lead? What if more of a float gets exchanged in January 17? So anyways, that's my analysis. That's my entertainment for the day. No financial advice, no investment advice ever. Please like, please subscribe. Follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. I appreciate all of the comments. You know what to do. Have a wonderful day.